Josh, welcome. Tell us about what you're doing and how blockchain fits into it.
Well, hi, I'm Josh. I'm the founder of Ehab. Ehab is a data management and process automation tool for the entire life cycle of a built asset, really focusing on sustainable and affordable built assets. The reason we're doing this is because we want to see a more sustainable world being built in the future, and we think that the main driver that will enable this to happen is, in fact, having data becoming an inherent part of the construction process, which it isn't at the moment. Okay. The way that we're using blockchain is effectively as a way to measure all of the transactions that occur on a daily basis over the course of the life cycle of a project. So the module that we're building right now basically tracks physical assets arriving on site, tracks who sent them, records the information of what that is, what the cost of that was, and then how it arrived at site. So who the driver was, who was the person who received that. Really, it's not a complicated tool. That we're trying to help automate invoicing and receipts for the actual people on site. And then when you're handing over that building, rather than giving someone 10 boxes of paper, you just send them the link to our site, which says, okay, cool, these are the items that are made up in the building, and we have a permanent record of that. And you can see how that interacted with the actual project itself.
So the way you see this is it's an individual blockchain per project, as it were.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. So a group of companies come together to collaborate on a project. They don't necessarily want to share a lot of data with each other outside of that project, but there is a really good use case for them being able to instantly share things between each other, because effectively when they come together, they become their own mini company just for a short while to complete the project. And
so with the individual players on the project each have its own copy of the blockchain, or would there be one central?
I think initially we're thinking it would just be one central, but it would really be down to the use case of the project. So if it's a government project, perhaps there might need to be an elevated level of security, in which case there may need to be a need for that. But in some cases, we'll just keep it simple and cost effective and just run it as a central thing.
So what are the main features of blockchain that's useful here, do you think?
For this particular module, bearing in mind this is just one of many modules we plan to build, we're just using the sort of the cryptographic signing feature, so recording when an item or a transaction occurred, and then just having a record of that state change. So what was the previous state, i.e. there are some bricks, it's sitting in the depot, and what's the change of state? So now the bricks are in a lorry with who is the person it's with. I'm just looking at how it's changing, how a particular object is changing through that state. So just basically an audit trail. Those are the two things. But we also have another demo which uses IoT, which is looking at helping use an IoT device to track weather events for basically on-site compensation. So if a bad weather event happens, you need to compensate workers and potentially extend the project. And so there are different features of the Cadre Core platform that we'll likely use in that scenario. Myself not being the techie, I'm not entirely sure which of those new features we'll be using, but each module will have its own use case for the types of technology we'll use from that Cadre Core stack.
Right, so for one project, how many modules do you think there would be?
So I think a really, really basic project, if you're, for example, a housing association, which is a lot of the organizations we're talking to at the moment are, you would just want to know, what are the physical assets that are moving around my site? What are the tasks, i.e. what's the labor that is moving those things to where it needs to be and building it into the building? And then how does that measure against the KPIs and the costs of what we thought we were going to be doing at this time? So a lot of that role traditionally is undertaken by a cost consultant who basically says, cool, what are we spending? Where's the money flowing, basically? What we're trying to say is we can augment what that cost consultant is doing by tracking those KPIs in real time against the plan and making decisions based on it.
So how do people generally do this now?
With paper, a lot of the time.
Really?
Genuinely, tracking paper tickets, and then someone will come to them and say, we need more bricks, or so-and-so is ill, or everything will be basically done on like a face-to-face paper-based basis, and then they will then edit the Excel spreadsheet, which they're using as the Gantt chart. Some companies might use some forms of project management tools, which we sort of later down the line plan to integrate with, because we're just capturing the data, we don't necessarily want to be the interface that everyone uses, just with the way that the data flows. There's a company that we are looking to start working with, which has a lot they're doing much more technical projects, so much more from an engineering perspective. It's just already more complicated, and they already have IoT devices embedded in a lot of their processes. And so for us, it's, well, we need to build a system which can be used on sort of a low level and still add benefit, where it also enables us to connect in with people who are already IoT enabled and can just sort of put that data into our system.
So what kind of backgrounds do you guys have? What do you bring into this? Are some of you building? Do you have building backgrounds or?
Nope.
No?
So I did environmental science at uni, and I'm just basically really interested in the future of our cities. Effectively, I think they're not being built particularly well at the moment, and I wanted to try and change that in some way. And everyone else in the team are coders, so we're just interested in building, useful products for making the future better.
How did you find the gap in the building trade, in the building?
Yeah, so for the last 3 years, I've been trying to start a variety of different companies in this space. So I initially started off trying to build basically like sustainable modular student housing. For about 3 months, was looking for land, looking to raise finances, realized that was very difficult, but learned a lot along the way, and then pivoted to another sort of tech platform looking at community-focused housing, and then another one looking at how you help small developers find finance and land. So each of these pivots, still using the Ehab name, enabled me to sort of learn, okay, what are the problems in this space for the types of developers that we want to sell to and we want to enable? And then, about this time last year or slightly earlier, we arrived on something which is, this full suite of tools, which is basically the data layer that we want to be.
And the things that blockchain buys you is this idea of being able to feed into it from different sources, and having an immutable trace of what's been done. So it's trusting in the end. It's trust.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, right, if you're collaborating on a project, any kind of project, if you trust the members of that project, it's going to have a better outcome than if you're all sort of not really trusting each other. And I think the not trusting each other is kind of the default of the construction industry at the moment, not necessarily through any fault of their own, just through the kinds of tools that are currently being used. And so we're saying, look, we can give you a better tool set to increase the trust, to increase that quality of the end product.
Right. So when you talk to people who will eventually be your customers, what do you tell them they're going to get from this that they don't have now? Efficiency,
I think, is the main thing, right? Like, if you're using paper and you're the manager of something, you generally know that that's not the most efficient way of doing things. It's just that is just the ingrained way that the industry works. And so the sales pitch then becomes, okay, we need to digitize, and it's actually nothing to do with blockchain. There just happens to be a few different interesting blockchain things under the hood, but it's the digitization that will bring that efficiency, and whatever suite of tools we use to enable that, well, it doesn't really matter at this point. We're using that as our unique selling point in terms of the actual efficiencies we can create, I think.
So where are you in the journey of your company? How near are you to a product?
We have a product. It's about to be demoed by a couple of different companies. We actually have a paying client and a couple of other clients who are looking to move to paid products later in the next few months. We have some larger sort of strategic partners which we're now sort of dancing with and understanding how our technology can fit into what they're doing. So we're in that stage of, okay, cool, we validated it. Now it's a case of, improving that and making it useful for not just 3 or 4 people, but 10, 20, 30 people, and then it moves from there, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.